Hello and welcome to PFF Wire. I'm Doug Kyed, joined as always by Brad Spielberger. Brad, how is your Friday afternoon going today?
Well, the nerd in me loves the NFL we're in now, where I really think we are seeing a new era of player movement and teams more open to the idea of moving big name players and letting other teams kind of go all in and do stuff. So it's a fun time for the NFL right now.
It definitely is. I just got back from Gillette Stadium, picked up some credentials, going to the game on Monday night against the Bears. So it was good to get some sun out there. But let's talk about the Christian McCaffrey trade. You were just talking about it a little bit. Christian McCaffrey traded from the Carolina Panthers to the San Francisco 49ers for second round pick, third round pick, fourth round pick, all in the 2023 NFL draft, plus a fifth round pick in 2024. This doesn't come as a massive surprise that Christian McCaffrey was traded because he was a name who was very hot on the trade market over the last week or so. But I would say that him going to the San Francisco 49ers wasn't necessarily the top team that we were expecting him to go to. At the same time, I mean, the 49ers do obviously value their running backs, maybe a little bit too much, given how much draft capital they've now invested in the position over the last few years. But what was your initial thought to this? I mean, it broke basically in the fourth quarter of last night's Saints-Cardinals game.
Front runner for this trade was the Los Angeles Rams, and Ian Rappaport confirmed that last night, saying they were also in the conversation offering a day two pick. I think potentially also including Cam Akers in that trade to kind of, get a win-win for both parties as it relates to moving the running backs. But, it's fascinating for a number of reasons. So first, like I mentioned, Christian McCaffrey now sets the record for a non-quarterback for the most dead cap left behind in a trade. Just another, example of how teams are not letting sunk costs hold them back. Other things that are interesting, the Panthers end up paying $27 million for 6 games of Christian McCaffrey's extension. This was the first year, technically, if you include his 5th-year option in 2021, this was the first year of his new deal, I should say. So they paid almost $30 million for 6 games of McCaffrey on the extension. And then lastly, this is a big-time trade compensation package. Depending what draft chart you look at, the NFL still does, if folks want to know and follow along. They use the Jimmy Johnson chart. They don't admit that. It's the case. They had it at a late first. The over-the-cap chart had it as a top 5 pick. The PFF chart has a top 10 pick. Nevertheless, a first-round pick return for a running back is a great trade for the Carolina Panthers and GM Scott Fitterer.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even as recently as yesterday, I was asking around the league, like, what do you think the Panthers will wind up getting for Christian McCaffrey? And people thought a second-round pick plus something else, third-round pick plus something else. And clearly this is, yes, a second-round pick plus something else, but the something else is a lot more than what was expected out of this deal. And yeah, I mean, I put that out there on Twitter last night that if you go by that Jimmy Johnson trade chart, this is somewhere between like the 20th to 25th, somewhere around there, 25th-ish pick, like right around there in the first round of the draft. It's definitely a first-round pick. And that's what the Carolina Panthers were aiming for. Scott Fitterer said that today, that, they had other offers on the table. People with first-round picks were not willing to give up their first-round pick, but the 49ers clearly were willing to give up a package that was the equivalent to them of a first-round pick. So, I mean, yeah, I was really impressed with the draft haul. Clearly, I think they would have preferred to actually get an actual first-round pick, but I also think that this allows them to build just as well, maybe even better with all these additional picks in the second, third, fourth round, everything like that. And I know that Ian Rappaport said today in a report that this allows the Panthers to move up if they need to for a quarterback. I don't think we necessarily expect that to be the case. I think they'll probably have the top pick in next year's draft.
That maybe could sneak in some accidental wins at the end of the season.
Yeah.
We saw it with Miami Dolphins, and
they're not tanking.
The reason they have Tua Tagovailoa and not Joe Burrow. So it's good assurance, but I agree with you. Always good to have that insurance if necessary. And then you mentioned the Niners. No first, second, third, or fourth round pick next year. Which, when you have a quarterback that you try to move on from this offseason, we're not always trying to be PFF nerds and running backs, all that. Like, you can make more aggressive moves. I think there's more justification for it when you have an elite quarterback on your roster. When you don't, and you're making this massive gamble, it's less about us just, devaluing the position and more just you don't trust the most important position in the sport. You look at the playoff games last year, he didn't go throw for 150 yards in any of the games. Like you might lose a game that way, and McCaffrey can't necessarily save you there. But nevertheless, they step up to make the big move, and I think the Rams, the NFC West rival, the obviously good buddies with Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, that can spur moves as well. And like you said, Kyle Shanahan is not afraid to spend on running backs.
Yeah, I think that McCaffrey might have even made a bigger impact on the Rams if he had gone there. Just because, I feel like the Rams running back depth is a little bit more depleted than the 49ers at this point. It's kind of a similar situation, but Jeff Wilson's been effective. Elijah Moore is good when healthy. But just one last thing on this McCaffrey trade. I'm fascinated to see actually how he's even used in San Francisco, because you kind of have two players at two different positions that do somewhat of the same things in Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey. Like Christian McCaffrey is a running back who has spent a decent amount of snaps in the slot and at wide receiver. Deebo Samuel, a wide receiver who spent even more snaps in the backfield for the 49ers. So I think that this does give them some more added creativity, versatility in their offense. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey's probably going to be playing almost every snap for the 49ers, given what they gave up for him. I think he's fourth this year overall as far as running backs go and snaps. So he's a guy who's been, when he stays healthy, he's on the field for almost every snap. But that's the other big thing here is if Christian McCaffrey can actually stay healthy enough to make this deal worthwhile.
Yeah. One last note, too. I tweeted this last night. We got a comment reminding me, so I appreciate that. Witness. The Niners do have compensatory picks this year. They have the last one for the departure of Robert Saleh and Martin Mayhew, and then they have one this year and one next year for head coach Mike McDaniel. Yep. So they do have maybe 2 picks that are going to be right around 100. But yeah, for their offense, look, again, I think it's going to be a dynamic. Kyle Shanahan is going to scheme up some wild things. I saw a funny tweet that he has all these weapons now. He's going to have McCaffrey fake, Deebo Samuel fake, George Kittle, and then Kyle Juszczyk's going to rip one off for 40 yards. That's just. But anyway, yeah, he's got a lot at his disposal. I think he'll be very creative in how he deploys all of them.
I will say, I think it was like a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, something like that. You and Nate Tice were going back and forth about how valuable running backs are in the NFL, and I wanted to squash the beef a little bit. So I threw in a joke and said, what's actually going to happen is that a Shanahan disciple is going to trade for Christian McCaffrey, and they're going to wind up playing Devontae Freeman over him. So the first half of that has happened. Now it's just a matter of the 49ers signing Devontae Freeman.
Stay by your phone, Devontae. Stay by your phone.
They could do that with Tevin Campbell as well. Tevin Campbell could slot in there instead of Devontae Freeman. Let's talk about another trade possibility, it seems like. The New York Jets wide receiver Elijah Moore did not practice yesterday, initially reported as a personal matter, thing that people actually thought that it was something to do with his family. Then it comes out, wasn't a personal matter. He actually wants to be traded. So this is a pretty bizarre situation, honestly, for Elijah Moore. Yes, he's not getting a lot of targets right now. He's only got about 200 something receiving yards. The Jets in general are succeeding. They're 4-2, but they're just not really throwing the ball that much with Zach Wilson. But my biggest takeaway on this is that you're a second-year player in Elijah Moore. He missed 6 games with injury last year. He was a second-round pick. The team is 4-2. It's just not a great look to be requesting a trade at this point. Like, off-season, yeah, I think it's fair to request a trade, and I can see from his perspective, if he only winds up with 400 or 500 yards this season, then maybe no one's going to want him. But in the middle of a 4-2 stretch, this is kind of a tough look right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, again, there's several fascinating components to this. So first, like you said, it's so early in his career. But I think what's fascinating is apparently what was the catalyst here was he had a blow up with offensive coordinator Mike LaFleur. I looked yesterday because I was curious if there was a split between his targets on scripted plays, which we define as the first 15 plays of the game, and then non-scripted plays, which is the rest of the playbook when the quarterback maybe is more, freelancing as opposed to just following a play and getting guys open. And Moore is targeted more more than David, or the same amount. He has 10 targets on scripted plays. Corey Davis and Garrett Wilson have 10 combined. But then after scripted plays, those guys surpass him by a great degree. So is his problem really with Mike LaFleur, or is Zach Wilson not looking his way? But I think also Mike Renner, our draft analyst, did point out he's playing way more out wide, was a slot receiver in the NFL. So maybe that's part of the issue. He wants to be deployed there. A couple other dynamics. He has the same agent as Deebo Samuel and A.J. Brown, two guys that also requested trades this offseason. One got the trade in A.J. Brown. The other got a massive extension in Deebo Samuel that kind of, made those concerns go away. So, and then lastly, Denzel Mims, the second-round draft pick the year before, is on the roster, never plays. Ironically enough, will play this weekend because Moore is not. But there's just kind of so many elements to where this comes from. But anyway, long answer short, you and I think, agree, are 99.9% player-friendly, pro-player.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is a bit kind of ridiculous, frankly, this early when the team's winning games for the first time in forever to be asking for a trade.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned this off the start. The Jets have said, I think, to multiple people now that they're not going to grant the trade request for Elijah Moore, which from their perspective, yeah, that 1,000% makes sense since it's the same regime that just drafted him. If this was like a different coach, different GM, then maybe you could accommodate something. But I mean, definitely not a great sign that Elijah Moore now not going to play this week for the Jets. And you know what? Jets fans, I know in general, are not very happy with PFF right now. They think that every single one of their players should be a 95 plus graded player right now. So I don't think this is going to really please them that much, but this is obviously, yes, it's somewhat of an Elijah Moore problem. As you said, I kind of think it's a Zach Wilson problem too, because Zach Wilson has struggled a little bit more now in recent weeks. He was actually PFF's top graded quarterback from his draft class a couple of weeks ago. Last week wasn't so great for him, but Elijah Moore was getting the ball more when Joe Flacco was the quarterback. And obviously you want Zach Wilson to start. They're having success with Zach Wilson. I have no problem with Zach Wilson being in there, but I think that Elijah Moore just kind of needs to be a little bit more patient, wait for Zach Wilson to actually be putting up 300, 400-yard passing games if he can get up to that point, because then, yeah, the ball will get spread around, but Zach Wilson just not throwing the ball right now, so not everyone's going to have 100 yards in each game.
He completed 10 passes against Green Bay. And, the game script was they were up the entire time. They should be running the football. It's also, again, I mean, I get it's tough. I do get it's a business and Moore wants to get paid. So, I understand where he's coming from. But, again, do you also want to win? They added 2 tight ends this offseason. He was a top 10 pick on Garrett Wilson. Yeah, it might lead to you getting less touches. And I totally understand the frustration there. But, yeah, you're 4-2. They're on their first 3-game win streak since 2019. Those things sometimes do have to kind of balance each other out. Unfortunately, to the detriment of his looks.
Obviously, the Panthers are big in the news right now because of the Christian McCaffrey trade, but there's a lot else swirling around about them. One of which is that they will need a head coach after the season. And there was a tweet from, I am now forgetting his name, but he posted this transcript of what Jay Glazer said on Fox Sports Radio. And I'm obviously not going to read this whole thing, but I thought a few lines in this of what Jay Glazer was saying about the Panthers head coaching search, about other players that they could trade, was pretty fascinating. He said that the Panthers reached out to me, that being Jay Glazer. Hey, would Sean Payton be interested? He said that Sean Payton, doesn't see Sean Payton going there. Later on in this, he says Sean Payton is not going to be your next head coach. Carolina Panthers, Sean Payton will not be your next head coach. But I thought it was pretty fascinating that, Glazer is saying that the Panthers are reaching out to him basically for advice on their head coaching search. But then he also gave them advice and said, look, they got a bunch of Matt Rule picks in there and they like a lot of their young defensive players. But I told them, listen, if someone's going to give you the world for Derek Brown or Burns or somebody, go for it. Start over with somebody new. Don't get married to somebody else's talent. I know teams are calling about guys like that. I know there's been a lot of skepticism that the Panthers would actually trade Brian Burns or Derek Brown. Certainly don't see it being J.C. Horn or anything like that. But when Scott Fitterer was talking today, he said that, they've had interest. They'll listen to anything, but that they want to keep that young defensive core in there. I do think it's interesting, though, that Jay Glazer they clearly value Jay Glazer's advice on their head coaching search. And now he's telling them, like, hey, listen to anything. If you can get the world for these players, then go for it.
It is interesting because I think it goes both ways to where if you're trying to attract a head coach, you want some young talent to be the nucleus that you can then build off of. At the same time, like you're saying, you also, you know, in the NFL, a lot of coaches and GMs come in and they want their guys, which is probably not the greatest way to go about it, but nevertheless is the reality. You know, Burns also is heading into his 5th-year option season because of Pro Bowls. I want to say he has either the second highest or the highest. I think it's second highest. You know, valuation for that about $17 million, I think, on just a 5th-year option. So, you know, and could make really good money. Him, Montez Sweat, Rashawn Gary, all in that draft class coming up for new deals. So, you know, realistically could be making $20+ million per year. And while he may be worth it on an individual basis, if you're, again, trying to rebuild this team that is in a very, very bad financial situation, are projected over the cap, I guess were before the McCaffrey trade, but, you know, are not in a super healthy situation going forward, they need to kind of rebuild, retool, add some young surplus value talent via draft picks. So I get what he's saying, but I would also I think it's fair for Carolina to say, yes, but only if we're truly blown away. We're talking maybe multiple first-round pick type of deal because, you know, it's hard to land a Brian Burns with the 16th overall pick in the draft. I mean, that was a great draft pick. And so it is interesting. To the coaching point, I think it is smart of them to say, maybe not they want it publicly, but smart of them to at least think internally, you want an NFL experienced head coach. Again, don't go for some retread that is, you know, had given 10 chances, but they tried the college thing. They have a good defense, but I think it's smart to, you know, try to get an offensive coach if possible. Maybe don't pigeonhole yourself if it doesn't work out and completely rule out a guy like a D'Amico Ryans or some of those type of candidates. But I think you should prioritize offense if possible, considering, you know, you're 31st in EPA per play, you know, the last 2 seasons with the quarterback carousel you've been dealing with. So I think it makes sense. I think it's smart. I wonder what those names turn up. You know, you've talked about Frank Smith and some of the candidates that are coordinators. Are those guys experienced enough, or do they want, you know, like a Sean Payton? Are they keeping an eye on Frank Reich? Are they keeping an eye on Mike McCarthy? Are they trying to convince Gary Kubiak to unretire? Like, what are the real kind of candidates that they're truly eyeballing?
Yeah, it is definitely an interesting situation. With Brian Burns, he's having one of his best NFL seasons this year. He didn't grade particularly well for us last year, but he's grading much better this year. I would say, obviously, the Panthers need a quarterback, and they're probably going to use that top pick on a quarterback, whether it's, you know, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud. But there's a lot of season left in college, and, you know, there was a time when everyone thought that Tua Tagovailoa was going to be the top pick in his draft, and obviously that didn't happen. You know, if they do wind up getting whatever it is, a top 15 pick, top 10 pick, whatever it would be for someone like Brian Burns, maybe someone threw this out to me. I didn't necessarily agree with it, but a source, I'd say a league source, threw out the possibility of like, hey, what if they took Will Anderson first overall and then waited on the quarterback and got someone like Will Levis? Then you replace Brian Burns with maybe particularly like a cheaper player or maybe a player with maybe slightly higher upside. Then you wait on your quarterback. Like I said, I don't think that's necessarily going to happen, but that would be the other alternative of trading a guy like Brian Burns, where you actually replace him with someone at the position who's going to come in cheaper than what he's going to cost next season on the 5th-year option, and then moving forward if they decide to franchise tag him or sign him to a contract extension. So, yeah, there's a few different things at play there. Just real quick before we get into fantasy news and notes, Saints-Cardinals last night, obviously, like I said, it was overshadowed a little bit by Christian McCaffrey. But, I mean, you were tweeting about this a little bit earlier today. The Saints they're in rough shape right now.
Very, very rough shape. And I know we kind of had this battle, all of us salary cap nerds, you know, every offseason have this argument and debacle with the Saints fans, and we get it. You can become cap compliant. Obviously, you can become cap compliant. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. But when you are pushing all of your money down the line season after season on aging players, on now injured players like Michael Thomas, it does eventually catch up to you, and it has caught up to them. I know they tried to get in the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes. They fell short there. But you now don't really have a quarterback on your roster long-term. I mean, Ian Rappaport has been saying for the last week now that when Jameis is healthy, Dalton may stay the starter. Granted, that might change after back-to-back pick sixes in a minute last night. But so you don't have quarterback settled. Your 2 best defensive players, arguably, are Cam Jordan, who'll be 34 next year, and Demario Davis will be 34 next year. Marshawn Lattimore, obviously a very good player as well. But then, you know, Michael Thomas has the biggest cap hit on the team. Is he ever going to be a guy that can play 17 weeks for you? We have no idea. Like, it's really ugly. They are $54 million over a projected salary cap we have. They have no first-round pick. They have no 2024 second-round pick. I mean, this is what happens. And I would say when you had Drew Brees it was far more understandable. Once you don't have the quarterback, it just does not make sense. And they are in a hole that could last for a couple years.
Yeah, and I think that they had high hopes for this season that, Jameis would be able to carry them and that they added all this talent around him. But the talent has been injured, which certainly hasn't helped. But I also just think that, you need the quarterback. So the biggest issue there, I guess one of the biggest issues, is they don't have a first-round pick because they traded it as part of the Trevor Penning deal. The alternative there, though, or the other side of the coin, is that they will probably wind up getting a first-round pick if a team wants to trade for Sean Payton. That being said, though, wouldn't it be much better to have 2 first-round picks, to have your 2023 first-round pick plus whatever you get for Sean Payton? I mean, because they basically need to either keep doing this veteran quarterback carousel that's not necessarily starter money, or what they desperately need is a quarterback on a rookie contract. And it's just more difficult to do that without the first round pick. But I did also think, as much as we want to criticize the Saints and everything like that, I did think that was a nice bounce back game for the Cardinals last night.
No question about it. And it's funny, DeAndre Hopkins comes back and had 14 targets last night, 11 catches. Just immediately showing how valuable and important he is to that team. Robbie Anderson barely played. Also found notable, AJ Green played 0 snaps last night. And as far as we know, was not healthy. I think being kind of phased out of that offense. When Marquise Brown does return, it might be hard for Green to get on the field. And that's the team that plays, 5 wide receivers more than any other team in the NFL by a significant margin. So I thought that was notable as well. But yeah, they needed that game. Credit to their defense, 2 young players in Marco Wilson and Isaiah Simmons, both with the return touchdowns. Your tweet of Wilson doing the front flip in the end zone was hilarious. That was one of the best camera captures of the entire NFL season. But yeah, they needed that game. They now get the extended rest in the mini bye week, try to get their season back on schedule. We also did see, though, Kyler Murray kind of yelling at Cliff Kingsbury. It does happen.
It's so funny.
But, he told him to calm the F down 5 times and was screaming at him. So I don't think things are perfect there, but DeAndre Hopkins is always a solid cure for your ails.
Yeah, Benjamin played well in that game. I thought that Keontae Ingram had some decent carries in there as well. And yeah, it's so funny. A guy like AJ Green, who was obviously one of the best wide receivers in the NFL for almost 10 years, is now this just crazy afterthought in a Cardinals offense that just traded for Robbie Anderson. So they clearly feel like they need wide receiver help. But yeah, nice little bounce back game for the Cardinals there. But it is funny that even in a big win over the Saints, still some yelling at each other on the sideline. And the Marco Wilson thing, it was the greatest flip I've ever seen probably in my entire life, outside of maybe watching the Olympic gymnastics or something like that. And the funny thing was that I had basically just gotten off the phone with Marco Wilson's dad, ironically enough, or weirdly enough, because I was talking to him about a story that I wrote about another player that he's training. And yeah, it was just so strange that I was just off the phone with Marco Wilson's dad, and he's doing this fantastic flip into the end zone. So that was cool to see him do that. Let's take a quick break for one of our sponsors. PFF Wire is sponsored by Western and Southern Financial Group. While you focus on your roster moves, Western and Southern helps advance your money moves. Buying your first home, planning to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow? Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance, investment, and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. Team up to understand needs and address goals with a game plan built just for you. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. All right, let's get into fantasy news and notes. We're going to go game by game here, starting off with the Falcons and Bengals. Not a lot of injuries in this one. As of Thursday, Jamar Chase was limited with a hip injury, but the Bengals are favored by 6.5 points, and the point total is 47.5.
Yep, T. Higgins back to full practice finally, which is great news for him. And a huge injury on the opposite of those guys. Casey Hayward Jr. was put on injured reserve. Their number 2 corner opposite of A.J. Terrell, a really, really good veteran player for a long time. It's a big loss. They did have 4th-round sophomore pick Darren Hall stepped in last week, actually in half a game at a 90 PFF grade.
Yeah.
But, obviously very, very small sample, but of course encouraging. But that could be a big loss against, obviously, a Cincinnati offense that's trying to get going. On the other side of the ball, though, DJ Reader not being there for Cincinnati. Arthur Smith is one of the best run game coordinator executors in the entire NFL, and I think he can take advantage of that. The New Orleans Saints certainly did in their loss to Cincinnati, kind of just abusing them up front in the middle at the point of attack without DJ Reader. So I think both offenses can score a lot of points in this game.
Definitely. What's the point total on that one? It is 47 and a
47
half.
and a half.
Yeah, I could definitely see
which
a lot
for
of
this
points
season's
being
high.
scored there. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Next up, the Cowboys are favored by 7 points at home against the Detroit Lions. Point total is 49 in this game. You've got wide receiver DJ Chark did not practice as of yesterday. Josh Reynolds did not practice as of yesterday. Lions running back DeAndre Swift was limited in practice yesterday, but he said that he is pushing towards playing. Just from a betting angle in this one, I was actually just listening to some Boston sports radio on the way home, and they had RJ Bell on, who's kind of a betting expert, and he made some good points on this game. And one of them was just that, maybe Dak Prescott coming back from that hand injury a week too early, just because Cooper Rush had some success there. Obviously, there was a quarterback controversy, or Jerry Jones was acknowledging one for a few weeks there. That died down a little bit, but it probably would have made more sense for Dak Prescott to take the next week's bye before coming back in this game. But just if Dak Prescott's not 100%, the Detroit Lions have been good on backdoor covers this season. I could just see the Lions at least covering in this game against the Cowboys with a 7-point point spread.
It's a good note. They're also coming off a bye of their own, and they did have a handful of injuries they needed to get guys healthy from. And they have one of the better tackle duos in the NFL in Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell. Yeah. So, no one can stop Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence and Dorrance Armstrong and all these guys. But, their offensive line is better suited than most to at least slow them down a little bit. So I like that as well. I don't know if I'm betting either side, but 7 points seems like a lot where we don't know exactly where Dak Prescott stands right now.
Yeah, and that point total is high too at 49 points, especially with how stingy Dallas's defense has been, at least in the pass rushing game. I don't know. So I would probably lean towards taking the Lions and the under in that game. But next up, Colts and Titans. Titans are favored by 2.5 points at home. Point total is 42.5. Big fantasy injury here to note. Jonathan Taylor has been practicing in full this week on that ankle injury. He said last week, I was expecting him to play last week based on what had happened in the Thursday night game before that. But he said that it just didn't really feel right in practice last week. That's why he sat out. But now he's been a full go. Nyheim Hines has been a full go. So at least looks like it's trending towards those guys being good to go. Still worth kind of monitoring that situation on game day, but definitely a positive sign that Jonathan Taylor has been a full participant in practice.
No doubt about it. That was pretty funny. Deion Jackson had 10 receptions in their game. It was certainly a serviceable replacement for both of those guys. Nyheim Hines more the receiver, Taylor more the carrier. But yeah, obviously massive to get these guys back. And this is a huge, huge divisional game. The Colts already lost at home against Tennessee. So they lose this game. The odds of winning the division really do get much, much tougher going forward. So I think it's a huge game. Tennessee also team up a bye that could use it with some injuries of their own. They're seemingly really tough with the injury bug the last 2 seasons, but I think this will be a great one. I'm afraid of touching it at all because I think it's a game where both teams, I think, really are going to give their maximum effort in this game. I'm excited for this one.
We do have one question here from Crazy Gideon. Crazy Gideon asks, Joe Burrow over 2.5 pass touchdowns, a good bet? I'll throw that one to you, Brad.
I like it. I would have to know kind of the plus money or minus. Right. Maybe if you let us know, we can touch on it again. But I do, because I think, as I mentioned, not only do I like the matchup for Cincinnati from a scoring standpoint, it's a bad defensive line rushing the passer, so Burrow should have time. They're missing Casey Hayward. But then also, because Atlanta I expect to score as well, means that Cincinnati might have to keep throwing the ball, which is a big part of when you want to bet these 2.5 touchdowns. You need the game script in your favor. So I do like it, pending if it's minus money or plus money. But plus money. Yeah, I would throw a little bit of scratch on that. I like that.
I did think that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase both looked back to form last week as well. Next up, Packers favored on the road against the Washington Commanders, and I'm a moron. I did not include the point total on this one, so we'll have to look that up real quick while I run through the injuries. I'll let Brad handle that maybe while I run through the injuries.
I gotcha.
What is it?
41.5, so a very low total.
41.5, low total there. On the Packers side, wide receiver Randall Cobb did not practice yesterday with an ankle injury. Christian Watson did not practice yesterday with a hamstring injury. Don't think we expect to see either one of those guys on Sunday against the Commanders. On the Commanders side, you've got Dyami Brown, Logan Thomas out. Taylor Heineke is going to start at quarterback, and rookie wide receiver Jahan Dotson is questionable. This is... I kind of lean towards the Packers on this one. I know they've had their struggles, but the Washington Commanders have just been so bad. Taylor Heineke, though, kind of a wild card in this one. I almost feel like I'd feel more comfortable taking the Packers if it was Carson Wentz at quarterback.
I think that's fair. Heineke's plucky every once in a while. He can kind of give you some good. The bad does mix in. I do think, though, I'm surprised Dotson's even listed as questionable, frankly. I did this last week with Keenan Allen. I'll do it again. Again, preface, I'm not giving breaking news, but Dotson pulled up with a hamstring. It's been bothering him for a couple weeks now. There was a video of him in practice where it looked like he re-injured it. This happened to Rondale Moore earlier in the season and Keenan Allen earlier in the season where they were close to returning. They tweaked the hamstring on a Thursday or a Friday, and then both missed multiple weeks, not just 1 week. So I personally would be shocked if Jahan Dotson plays in this game.
Yeah, Keenan Allen still wasn't back as of last week. Next up, we've got the Buccaneers favored by 13 points on the road against the Panthers. And the point total is only 39.5. In this one, you've got Julio Jones was still limited last week with a knee injury. And they said today that they're going to be kind of taking it slow, playing the slow game with Julio Jones. And Panthers quarterback Baker Mayfield doubtful with an ankle injury in this one. They've still got PJ Walker, Jacob Eason there at quarterback. Sam Darnold has returned to practice, but doesn't really sound like that would be an option yet, quite yet at this point. But Panthers team depleted now without Christian McCaffrey, and so odd to see a trade like that so late in the week where now the Panthers kind of have to scramble a little bit. I mean, I would say that maybe they knew that they were going to wind up trading Christian McCaffrey this week, but I don't think his teammates certainly knew. So now, Chuba Hubbard, Deontay Foreman going to have to take over for Christian McCaffrey in that offense.
Yeah, and it's interesting, not all points are created equal in spreads, but still, this moved 2 points, which is a ton for a running back. I mean, some quarterbacks are valued at 2 points. So it was -11 last night, and that could just be the public maybe reacting and not necessarily sharp bettors, but nevertheless, when a line moves that many points off of seemingly one piece of information, look, McCaffrey is a running back again, but he's probably the best receiving running back in the NFL or up there in that conversation. Like you said, he's on the field on 95% of snaps, so just so important to this team. Again, though, the Tampa Bay was on the road laying 10 points last week against a Pittsburgh Steelers team that did not have a secondary or a starting secondary, and it did matter. They could not win that game. So as much as it could be a total blowout and a get-right game for Tampa Bay, I'm personally not laying 2 touchdowns with them right now.
Yeah, I'd almost feel a little bit more comfortable taking the Panthers and the points the Panthers and the under here, just because, I don't know, the Buccaneers kind of need to prove it to me that they're going to beat a team by 13 points here. I think that they still win, but I don't know, 13 points is a lot. Next up, we've got the Giants and the Jaguars. This one is a little bit confusing to me. The Jaguars favored by 3 points at home over the 5-1 Giants. Point total is 43 as of yesterday. Giants wide receiver Kadarius Toney did not practice. Running back Saquon Barkley limited on the Jaguars side. Jamal Agnew, wide receiver, did not practice, and wide receiver Marvin Jones was limited. Obviously, this tells you that Vegas or whoever's betting on these games is still not taking the Giants seriously, which roster construction wise, talent wise, everything like that, I can understand, but the Giants have been winning tough games this season. Brian Daboll has been doing a great job. Great coaching staff there in New York. Yeah, I guess it's possible the Giants could lose this one, but the Jaguars have kind of underperformed this season from my perspective.
So this is one where, kind of the underlying metrics really tell the story. Obviously, the records are strongly in favor of the Giants, but you look at early down expected points added per play, which is one of the most telling predictive metrics of how a team's actually performing. I also looked at this and I adjusted it for opponent as well. The Jaguars are playing better than expected on offense and defense when adjusting for opponent in that early down EPA per play. The Giants are the opposite. They're underperforming in both areas. So again, we know, yes, the wins and losses matter more than some, crazy metric I just said that half of you just tuned out for. But this is what Vegas looks at and how these spreads are
Right.
set and how these lines are made. And so I get it is, you might see that go, oh, wow, the 5-1 Giants +3, completely understandable. They very well could win or cover that spread. But yeah, the underlying data really shows the Jaguars are a better football team, just have not been having the results go their way so far.
Definitely not so far. We'll see how Trevor Lawrence can perform in that game. Next up, we've got the Browns and the Ravens. Ravens favored by 6.5 points at home. Point total 45.5. Ravens tight end Mark Andrews was practicing today. Running back J.K. Dobbins was not at practice. And then wide receiver Rashad Bateman was limited as of yesterday. Based on some of the reports out there, it kind of seems like Mark Andrews likely will play. After not practicing today, I'd be cautious with J.K. Dobbins. I'm not quite sure if that's looking positive for him to play in that game. And if he doesn't, probably see a lot of Kenyon Drake this upcoming weekend. Kenyon Drake was very productive last week on Sunday. That being said, though, like basically all of his whatever it was, 119 yards or whatever it was before contact. He wasn't really making guys miss, wasn't really, running after contact so much. It was some great blocking up front by the Ravens. So it's possible that Kenyon Drake could turn back the clock to 2020 again in this matchup against the Browns, but I wouldn't say that he was necessarily creating his own yards in that game.
It's notable because, Cleveland has not had at practice Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney. I think Clowney's expected to not play. Am I right there?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
Denzel Ward.
Yeah.
Denzel Ward is out. And then also on the offensive side, Wyatt Teller, who's our third highest graded guard in the NFL right now, also not going to play in this game for the Cleveland offense. So, I did earlier this week. We liked Cleveland getting that many points. It's a lot of points in a divisional matchup. And, against the Baltimore Ravens, again, talk about teams that look better than their record based on a lot of stuff you look at. Yeah. The Ravens are very much so in that conversation. Yes. But I thought it was a lot of points. Maybe some of the injuries, I think, skew in Baltimore's favor. And then, Ronnie Stanley, their left tackle, has not surrendered to pressure since returning to the lineup now. If they're missing Jadeveon Clowney, they can work around Garrett a little bit, maybe get some chip help and do some things to make it a little bit easier there. So I think all of that is kind of skewing in Baltimore's favor. But I think probably kind of a stay away here. A huge game. I mean, Cleveland's season kind of on the line here. Baltimore arguably as well. I mean, it's a big game for both parties.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that, the Giants last week played Lamar Jackson about as well as anyone possibly could have. I just don't know if the Browns have the capability to do that with the talent that they have on their defense. It's certainly possible. But yeah, 6.5 points does seem like a lot for a Browns team that hasn't been terrible. Did lose to Bailey Zappi last week, but probably be leaning a little bit more towards the Ravens in that one. Next up, another somewhat surprising line here. The Jets favored by 1 point over the Denver Broncos in Denver. Point total in this one is 38, as we mentioned earlier. Elijah Moore out after that trade request. Wide receiver Braxton Berrios was limited yesterday. Russell Wilson was limited yesterday. I think that the belief is that Russell Wilson, or at least the Jets, are preparing as if Russell Wilson is going to play in that game. He is dealing with a hamstring injury, however. But, I mean, apparently Vegas buys the 4-2 hot start Jets here. Denver's defense is so good that I don't know. I mean, I'd maybe be a little bit more tempted to take the dog and the under in this game with the Broncos and under 38 points.
Before I jump in, Doug, if I told you before week 1 that Russell Wilson's Broncos would be a home underdog to the New York Jets, what would you have said to me?
I would have said lay off the drugs there, Brad. I mean, this is insane. It's insane. Like I said, Jets fans have been loving themselves. It's amazing. Like because I covered the Patriots for 8 years or whatever it was. Like I went to Jets games every year for 8 years in New York. There was literally, I don't think there was a single time there was ever buzz around the New York Jets. Like there was always zero buzz. MetLife Stadium was like silent, terrible to go into, like gray. This is cool. It's awesome that Jets fans now are like coming out of the woodwork. And like anytime that you tweet anything about like that mentions a Jets player or anything like that, like Jets fans just like barrage you with tweets. And I don't know, the NFL is probably much better when the Giants and the Jets are good, because you forget that they're in this massive market with all of these fans who've just been dormant for so many years because their teams have been doormat. So yeah, I'll get off my soapbox here, but it's cool that Jets fans are actually being vocal now.
Sometimes we don't like getting yelled at on Twitter all day long, but I promise you, in the PFF offices behind closed doors or behind Slack chat doors, we love it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so much fun to have these passionate, excited fan
Yes.
bases engaging, and the Jets they've been a lot of fun so far this year. But anyway, yeah, they also opened +3.5 or +3, depending on the book, and it's moved all the way across zero and out of the other side. Russell Wilson, I think his injury, I think I agree with you. He's a tough guy. He doesn't really miss time, but maybe Vegas thinks he's not going to be 100% because it's the shoulder and the hamstring. I don't think the shoulder is fully healed at this point. He had that ball I want to say it was Jerry Jeudy that was about 10 yards underthrown in the Chargers game over the middle. It was like one of the, I looked at it and said, everyone likes to make their Russell Wilson jokes, but this is not a bad throw. This is an injured throw. Right. I think all that plays into it. But like you said, I know right now on totals that are, I want to say 39 and under, and they're 9-0 this season. So a lot of times you see the low number, you say, oh, well, I want to bet the over because it's so low. They're so low for a reason. Right. I agree. I honestly think this game could end like 7-3. Like both of these defenses are so much better than these offenses.
Did you see this week that Russell Wilson went like 2 straight press conferences without saying Broncos country, let's ride?
R.I.P. It's a sad end.
Broncos country, let's ride. All right, let's get into the next game here. Texans, Raiders. Raiders favored by 7 points in Las Vegas over the Texans. Point total is 45.5. Hunter Renfrow was not practicing as of yesterday with a hip injury. I believe he was practicing today, or at least Josh McDaniels said that there's some optimism or whatever it is that he could play this weekend. Darren Waller did not practice with a hamstring injury. I think it was the same thing with Josh McDaniels as far as Darren Waller goes. And then wide receiver Matt Collins and tight end Foster Moreau, both limited. There were no major fantasy injuries as far as the Texans go, but Vegas is making it tough with these with these point spreads because I don't know, 7 points kind of seems like a lot for the Raiders against the Texans.
Yeah, and this is, come off a bye week, and we still have Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller not practicing late in the week. I mean, that's, for Waller's a hamstring that he left early in that game and basically didn't play the rest of the week, but really concerning that you have an entire week off and these guys are still, not even close to 100% coming into this game.
Yeah, and we do have a comment here from Jared. He said, so I'm crazy to think the Jets are the better team at this point over the Broncos. I don't think you're crazy, but I think that just the fact that that game is in Denver and the Jets are favored tells you that, if this was a neutral playing field, the Jets would be favored by Brad, I cannot hear you, but did you mute yourself? Okay. Sorry. Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. But yeah, on a neutral playing field, I think the Jets would then be favored by 4 points in this game. So not only does Vegas think that the Jets are the better team, they think that they're like kind of not significantly better team, but like a sizably different team, a better team.
It's interesting. Yeah. Home field is less than a field goal nowadays, but yeah, no, it's crazy. Like you say, like they're not only favored, they're favored on the road. Are you crazy the Jets are better? I mean, bettors think they're better. So, we can't call you crazy, I guess.
Chargers, Seahawks next up here. Chargers favored by 5.5 points in Los Angeles. Point total here is 50.5. You've got Seahawks wide receiver Tyler Lockett did not practice yesterday with a hamstring injury on the Chargers side. Running back Joshua Kelly did not practice. Wide receiver Josh Palmer did not practice. Tight end Donald Parham did not practice. And Keenan Allen still limited with that hamstring injury. 50.5 points is a lot in this one.
It is for sure, because they asked Keenan Allen, if you need to miss another game and then take the bye week and then return, will you do that? And he was like, yeah, it's very possible. That is what ultimately happens. And Joshua Palmer, I think you listed as a knee here, or no, it's concussion. Yeah. So, both of those guys might not play. And as good as Mike Williams is, he's the guy that you maybe get 3-4 catches out of. He's not the guy that you're consistently hitting. Maybe Austin Eckler has, 15 targets in this game and gets a ton of work. But that's a high total. As bad as Seattle's defense is, they finally made some solid adjustments against Arizona. And obviously, got right for them. Definitely a high total and a lot of points as well. I know George Chahuri, our fearless leader, loves the Seahawks. With this many points against the Chargers team, maybe hard to blame him given the shakedown of the injuries here.
Definitely. And some late breaking news here. Wide receiver Julio Jones is out for the Buccaneers this week. So that just came in on Twitter. Next up, we've got the Chiefs favored by 2 points at the San Francisco 49ers. Point total is 49. Christian McCaffrey sounds like it's possible that he'll play in this game, according to some reports. I think some people have reported that it's likely that he'll play. kind of like the Chiefs in this one at just favored by 2 points.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm sure he gets mixed in a little bit. Obviously, one of the easier positions to get acclimated to. I mean, Robbie Anderson played on a short week heading into a Thursday, so even this late in the game, I think McCaffrey will get a couple touches, maybe a goal line package and stuff like that. Obviously, not the full kind of playbook and all they do on offense, but I think will be a minor factor. I agree with you though. I think the Chiefs probably are the favorite in this game. The Niners defense still not quite healthy. Lost a lot of guys last week. Big time revenge game for Charvarius Ward, the top corner for the 49ers, but he got hurt as well. So I also am just looking forward to this, Super Bowl rematch from a couple years ago. I think this could be, one of the best games of the weekend.
Wish that one was Sunday night instead of the Steelers at the Dolphins. Dolphins favored by 7 points at home. Point total is 44.5. And Steelers quarterback Kenny Pickett cleared from a concussion protocol. Steelers tight end Pat Freiermuth also cleared. On the Dolphins side, Jalen Waddle limited with a shoulder injury, and Tua will be back for this game as well, correct?
Yes, the full expectation is Tua is going to be a go, and as good as the other quarterbacks have held up, I think he is, clearly a better player than them and adds value. And we'll get this offense kind of clicking on a higher cylinder again. And I think this is interesting because Pittsburgh's issue before playing Tom Brady and the Buccaneers was kind of over the middle, where Mike McDaniel has made his money. Their linebacker situation with Devin Bush, has not been great this year. And Miles Jack, good veteran, but, got cut for a reason by Jacksonville. They looked good up the middle. Larry Ogunjobi, free agent, played well. Miles Jack had a phenomenal pass breakup early in that game. Devin Bush looked good, the former top 10 overall pick. So, it's interesting because I think it does favor Miami. But, Pittsburgh kind of played well in the weakness that Miami likes to exploit just last week.
I wonder what this point spread would have been if the Steelers didn't win last week. I just feel like 7 point, I don't know. Dolphins were so good earlier in the season that if they can return to form here with Tua, then I think that this could be, I feel like the Dolphins could outmatch the Steelers a little bit, but that win last week over the Buccaneers does make things a little bit more interesting. We'll get into this next game a little bit more on Monday's show, but certainly worth mentioning. Bears and Patriots. Patriots favored by 8 points at home against the Chicago Bears. Point total is 39.5, and they're favored by 8 with still some questions about who's going to start at quarterback for the New England Patriots. As I mentioned earlier, I was in Foxborough earlier today, and I actually asked Bill Belichick who would be starting at quarterback, or if they've made a decision about who's going to start at quarterback this week. And he gave a very illuminating answer here.
Has a decision been made about who's going to play quarterback or start quarterback on Monday?
We're just taking it day by day.
She's taking it day by day. Got that smile out of Bill Belichick, though. That's always good. He's been a little bit more friendly this year.
Yeah, he's having fun with giving non-answers, which you should. When you're going to say nothing and that everyone you're saying it to is frustrated, I would chuckle from time to time. Actually, Bill Belichick later in the press conference called this the PFF Wire Bowl, which I thought was cool. Kind of a shout out to Patriots versus Bears. Thought that was a very cool honor of him to say. But yeah, I think we touched on this. We'll dive into it more on Monday's show. Bill Belichick is playing some of the most man coverage in the NFL. I think actually might be the most man coverage in the NFL. Justin Fields is our second lowest graded passer against man coverage, does better against zone. He can take off with his legs, and that kind of can be exploited in a man-to-man scheme. But from a passing perspective, I think it's going to be a long afternoon for the Chicago Bears.
Definitely. Patriots wide receiver Nelson Aguilar was back at practice despite a hamstring injury today. He did not practice yesterday. Wide receiver Kendrick Bourne was limited yesterday with a toe injury. Quarterback Mac Jones limited with the ankle injury. Tight end Johnny Smith limited with an ankle injury. And running back Damian Harris a full go on that hamstring. He missed last week's game with a hamstring injury, but seems like he could wind up back in this game. As far as the whole Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi situation goes, I heard on Tuesday that Mac Jones was around 85 to 90% healed on that high ankle sprain. But as part of that report, I said, it's a 6-week injury and they're only at week 4 right now. So 85 to 90%, that makes you feel like, okay, well then he can definitely play if he's 85 to 90%. It's a high ankle sprain though. So 85 to 90% still is not 100. I'm doing some quick math here. It's actually 10 to 15% lower than 100%. Yep. So I would say that if Bailey Zappi starts this week, which I would say that I'd probably lean more towards Mac Jones playing this week. We'll find out what the final decision here is, though. But if Bailey Zappi plays, I wouldn't look at this as like, okay, well, the Patriots are going to go with Bailey Zappi. They like Bailey Zappi more than Mac Jones. I do think that this is an opportunity to be safe against a team, no offense, against the Bears that is not very good, and that I think they could win if Bailey Zappi or if Jacoby Myers or if Garrett Gilbert was out there at quarterback. Real quick here, because we ran over a little bit, best bets of the weekend. Do you have a best bet for Sunday?
Yeah, for Sunday. I was going to say, again, the New England Patriots.
All right.
So I'll just go with that one. You can give a Sunday one. The other thing working in favor of New England on the other side of the ball is, look, Bailey Zappi is limited. He's still a, fourth-round rookie, but where he grades really well for us and has a high yards per attempt is when kept clean, when there is no quarterback pressure. Good news, the Bears have the lowest pressure percentage in the NFL per our charting. So I think that also just works so much in their favor that if they were playing against, a Cooper Rush Dallas Cowboys team, I'd say, look, it gets more complicated because maybe both teams will struggle. I think Zappi with time in the pocket will do enough to win this game. 8 points is a lot, but I really do think the Patriots are going to win by a couple scores here.
Yeah, I think they probably will as well. And I think that if I had to go with the best bet this weekend, I'd probably go with the Chiefs, only favored by 2 points over the 49ers. It's in San Francisco, but PFF Green Line gives that a 0.4% edge. So I am going with Green Line on that one for the Chiefs. And I don't know, I just feel like the Chiefs are such a wagon this season. They just came off the loss to the Bills. I can't really imagine them dropping 2 straight here. And the 49ers are certainly good, but I'm not sure if they can really stand with the Kansas City Chiefs in this matchup. One thing before we go, in New England, everyone has been mentioning Zappy fever. Is there like a pun that I'm missing with Zappy fever? Because I was like
just get zapped, just start with the energy, the electricity.
Yeah, I like everyone's talking about Zappy fever, and I was like, I for a while I was like, am I stupid? Is like happy fever a thing, or is that like I'm missing some other like rhyme to Zappy or something? I don't think I am. I think that everyone's just being somewhat non-creative about everything. But all right, that will do it for today's PFF Wire. We will be back with you guys again on Monday. We'll spend like 2.5 hours talking about that Patriots-Bears game. Just kidding. It'll probably only be like 2 hours. But keep it on PFF.com for all of your news and analysis. Subscribe to PFF Plus, $79.99 a year. Make sure to download the PFF app. Follow Brad on Twitter at PFF_Brad. Follow me on Twitter at Doug Kyed. And if you don't want to watch us on YouTube, if you would prefer to listen to us on your phone, you can always subscribe to the PFF Wire podcast on Apple or Spotify. Just search for PFF Wire, and I promise you will find it. I believe in you. We will talk to you guys again on Monday.